1, 2, 3, 4.
Good morning, everybody. This is, oh my God, hi everyone. This is Jewish Talk coming to you live from Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Also streaming on the iHeart and iTunes app. And we can be seen in the studios on my Facebook Live page as well as WHPC's. And so, hello everybody. I'm waving to everybody. How you doing, everyone? How you doing? And so, hi there. In case you don't know. My name is Rabbi Pearl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. All this depends on when you are listening and you are watching. And I'm going to make sure that you can see us on our own Facebook over here. And we're so excited to see everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome. I hope we can all see you and look forward to sharing the important program that we have over here today. Today, Sunday, I would like to discuss next Shabbos. What am I talking about? Well, you see, this coming Shabbos, this coming Saturday, July the 6th, marks the Rebbe's yahrzeit. Who am I talking about? The Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of righteous memory, who was born in 1902, passed away on the early morning hours of the 3rd of Tammuz in 1994. And today we're going to discuss the Rebbe in conjunction with the upcoming Yom Histalkus. This coming Shabbos marks the 25th anniversary of the passing of the Rebbe. First, let me give you a brief biography of the Rebbe so we all can understand who am I talking about, and then go into some of the important teachings and how we all can be inspired during these times. So, welcome to Louis Pushkin, to Harvey Kipnis, to Tom Schwartz, to Jonathan Wolf, to Harold Kornfeld and Petrona. Hello, everybody. I'm waving at everybody. I'm waving it at the, as you know, we are seen on 2 Facebook Live pages, and that makes us, of course, a double-faced program. So, who was the Lubavitcher Rebbe? He was the 7th leader of the Chabad Lubavitch dynasty and is considered to have been the most phenomenal Jewish personality of modern times. To hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of sympathizers and admirers around the world, he was and still is, despite his passing, known as the Rebbe. Undoubtedly, the one individual more than any other that singularly was responsible for stirring the conscious and the spiritual awakening of world Jewry. Now, the Rebbe was born in 1902 on the 11th day of Nisan in Nikolaev in Russia. He was born to the renowned Kabbalist and Talmudical scholar and leader Rabbi Levi Yitzchok and Rebbetzin Chana Schneerson. His mother, Rebbetzin Chana, was known for her erudition, kindness, and extraordinary accessibility. Her courage and ingenuity became legend when, during her husband's exile by the Soviets to a remote village in the ancient in Russia, she labored to make ink from herbs that she gathered in the field so that her husband, the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, could continue writing his commentaries on many, many Torah subjects. The Rebbe himself was named after his ancestor, the 3rd Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, with whom he later shared many characteristics. To appreciate the Rebbe, I'd like to share with you a little story, how in the Rebbe's early life, that seems to be almost symbolic of everything that was to follow. When he was 9 years old, the young Menachem Mendel courageously dove into the Black Sea and saved the life of a little boy who had rowed out to sea and lost control of his small craft. The sense of other lives in danger seems to have dominated the Rebbe's consciousness of those who were drowning in assimilation, ignorance, alienation, and there was no one there to hear their cries, whether it were the young people on campuses in isolated communities, under repressive regimes. So the Rebbe, from early childhood, displayed a prodigious mental acuity. By the time he reached his bar mitzvah, the Rebbe was considered a Torah prodigy. He spent his teen years immersed in the study of Torah. The Rebbe got married in 1929, and he married the sixth Rebbe's daughter, the previous Rebbe. Her name, of course, is Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, and the marriage took place in Warsaw. The Rebbe later studied in the University of Berlin and then the Sorbonne in Paris. And it may have been in these years that his formidable knowledge of mathematics and sciences began to blossom. Significantly, dear friends, Monday, tomorrow, on the Jewish calendar, is the 28th day of Sivan. In 1941, it was June 23rd. And that's the day when the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe and his wife, arrived in the United States, having been miraculously rescued by the grace of Hashem from the European Holocaust. And the Rebbe's arrival here in the United States marked the launching of a sweeping new efforts in bolstering and disseminating Torah and Judaism in general. At that time, 3 central organizations were established under the Rebbe's leadership. One was known as the Merkaz L'Yonei Chinuch, Central Organization for Jewish Education, Kahos Publishing a Society, and Machne Yisrael, which is a social services agency. Now, shortly after his arrival, per his father-in-law's urging, the Rebbe began to publish various Hasidic books and Kabbalistic learnings, as well as a wide range of responses on Torah subjects. Now, today, dear friends, those who are joining us now, we are now discussing the significant date this coming Shabbos, this coming Saturday, July the 6th, is Gimel Tammuz, the third day of Tammuz, marking the 25th anniversary of the Istalkas of the passing of the Rebbe. So I'm now sharing with you a little biography of the Rebbe and some fascinating stories, as much as time will allow, that how the Rebbe looked and how we can be inspired by this great leader. Now, after the passing of his father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson, in 1950, the Rebbe he ascended to the leadership of the Chabad movement. And of course, the headquarters is well known by its address. The headquarters of Chabad is 770 Eastern Parkway, Brooklyn, New York. And soon Lubavitch institutions and activities took on new dimensions. The outreach philosophy of Chabad was translated into ever greater action, with Lubavitch centers. I grew up in London. It was called the Lubavitch House. Here in the United States, there was an amazing opening of Chabad houses in dozens of cities and on campuses around the world. The Rebbe keenly understood that our every action is part of a bigger picture. Every good deed we do brings humanity closer to an ultimate goal. Of course, the era of cosmic perfection and universal awareness of God, known in Judaism as the time of Mashiach. And the Rebbe spoke tirelessly about this time, demonstrating how the world is heading closer and closer to this special era, and how every person, you and me, can actualize it by increasing in acts of goodness and kindness. It's often said that we're not waiting for Mashiach. Mashiach is waiting for us. So on Monday afternoon, on March 2nd of 1992, while praying at the graveside of his father-in-law, the Rebbe suffered a stroke that paralyzed his right side and most devastatingly robbed him of his ability to speak. And 2 years and 3 months later, the Rebbe passed away in the early morning hours of the third day of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, in the year 5754, which would bring us to June the 12th, 1994. Now, sharing the uniqueness of the Rebbe and some of his teachings and stories in a moment, I want to say hello to everybody and to recognize all those who are joining us. It seems that Dr. Kilshevsky has been quarantined in Vermont. He was in Vermont last week. He still remains in Vermont. I got to check it out with the authorities. Couldn't they give him a pass to go home already? Enough already. And Joanne Sand is now calling from Georgia. Oh, is that Lake Georgia or just Georgia? Hello to Harold Kornfeld, and thank you so much for joining us. And again, welcome to your wife, Esther, and to Dr. Shore. Debbie Zuckerman, wow, good morning. And she actually says, thank you. That's very nice. Thank you so much. To Karen Dumbeck, Joshua Friedman. My goodness, this is fantastic. So again, feel free to post a comment, a thought or an idea as we discuss today one of the greatest personalities and leaders of our time in conjunction with the Rebbe. The Rebbe's teachings really propelled by his personal example, something that emulated us. You know, they say a good speaker, when he finishes, everybody claps and goes home. Applauds and goes home. But a leader, when he finishes speaking, we feel the feeling of let's march on. Let's identify with goal, with a mission in life. And I remember as a young yeshiva boy feeling that way. And the Rebbe would speak, and the excitement that would encapsulate me to want to share the Rebbe's thoughts. And so Chabad rapidly grew around the world with many of his activities. And I'm sure many of us listening or watching us know of the mitzvah tanks, whether in Manhattan or any place in the world, where you could be stopped by young students and asked, would you like to put on tefillin? So many still wonder, what is it about the Rebbe's leadership that was so unique? Why did leading personalities of the day maintain such a profound respect and admiration for him? Many leaders recognize the need of the moment and respond with courage and directions. This is their forte, admirable one. Others, though their strength may not lie in the instant response to current problems, are blessed with the ability of perceptive foresight, knowing what tomorrow will bring and how to best prepare. Still other leaders excel in yet a third distinction, possessing a keen sense of history and tradition. Their advice and leadership is molded by a great sensitivity to the past. But one who possessed all of these three qualities was truly unique, standing alone in his leadership. Such was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the inspiration and driving force behind the success of Chabad today. Radiating a keen sense of urgency, he demanded much of his followers and even more of himself. The Rebbe led, above all, by example. The Rebbe was a rare blend of prophetic, visionary, and pragmatic leader. The Rebbe was able to synthesize deep insight into the present needs of the Jewish people with a breadth of vision for its future. In a sense, he charted the course of history, initiating, in addition to reacting to it, to current events, and appreciated and understood it. The Rebbe was guided by insight and foresight in combining an amazing scholarship, and all of his pronouncements and undertakings were first and foremost rooted in the Torah. Time again, what was clear to him at the outset became obvious to other leaders with hindsight decades later. From the moment the Rebbe arrived in America in 1941 and tomorrow is that very date, his brilliance at addressing himself to the following ideals became apparent. That he would not acknowledge division or separation. He didn't like the different labels we give each other. Every one of us, indeed every human being, has a unique role to play in this greatest scheme of things, and each and every one of us are an integral part of the tapestry of God's creation. So for nearly 5 of the most critical decades in recent history, the Rebbe's goal to reach out to every corner of the world with love and concern unfolded dramatically. No sector of the community was excluded. Young and old, men and women, leader and layman, scholar and laborer, student and teacher, children and even infants. The Rebbe had an uncanny ability to meet everyone at their own level. He advised heads of state on matters of national and international importance, explored with professionals the complexity of their own fields of expertise, and was able to speak to small children with warm words and with a fatherly smile. So with extraordinary insight, the Rebbe perceived the wealth of potential in each and every one of us. His inspiration has now become accessible through his writings, through videos, that really, when I watch them, and you have the opportunity online, you watch these videos and read of the Rebbe's writings, it boosts our self-perception. It ignites an awareness of that hidden wealth, and that motivates our desire to fulfill our potential. In the same way, many a community has been transformed by the Rebbe's message and been given, directly or indirectly, a new sense of purpose and confidence. In each case, the same strong, if subtle, message is being imparted, that each and every one of us have been divinely gifted with enormous strength and energy, and each of us can actualize it. And I would like to now move into, let's call it, our Farbrengen side of our broadcast today, to appreciate many aspects of the Rebbe and understand how the Rebbe thought. And let me first begin with a story. L'chaim, right? The Farbrengen means L'chaim, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today as we join a special Farbrengen, special broadcast about the special time that we're living in here today on the Rebbe's upcoming yahrzeit and what we can learn from that. In fact, I'd like to share an important invitation that if you're listening to this and it's before Tuesday night, this coming Tuesday night at 7:30, there'll be a very special gathering at the Ohel where the Rebbe is laid to rest at the Old Montefiore Cemetery. It's called the Ohel. The access on Francis Lewis Boulevard. At 7:30 there will be a special gathering there, and one of the guest speakers will be Rabbi Yisrael Goldstein, who survived the terrorist attack at his synagogue, Chabad Synagogue in Poway in California. All are invited, men and women. There's no charge. There's actually food as well, which we Long Islanders love, and it's an opportunity to honor the Rebbe's legacy and for all of us to become inspired. If you need more information about that, certainly give us a call at 516-739-3636. So let's have a Farbrengen, which includes some stories, some insights on the Rebbe and how we can be uplifted by his teachings. The first, I want to tell you a little story. The story is told about Shmuel Monkeys. He was a student of the first Chabad Rebbe, and he was going there. We talk about it in Belarus and Russia there, and he's traveling. How did they travel in those days? We talk about a couple of hundred years ago. He was walking. It's a very cold day and snowing, etc. Finally, a wagon comes by, and he hitches a ride. Turns out to be a driver, and is carrying his wares. He's a merchant of drinks, of l'chaims, of bottles and bottles of vodka. So he gets into the back over there, and he's freezing. He looks around, and he sees all these bottles of l'chaim, of vodka, and he realizes that if he takes a few shots of this vodka, he'll feel a bit warmer, because he's freezing, it's freezing then. So he asks permission, and of course the driver is very happy to oblige, and he takes a few l'chaims, and he certainly feels warm. He's warmed up. When he arrives at the Alter Rebbe's home, in the shul, he tells him of the story, what happened. And he says, what I learned from this whole story is that one could be surrounded by great ideals and inspiration and wonderful example, but if a person doesn't internalize it, doesn't take it in, just as this Shmuel Monkeys, if he hadn't said l'chaim, he would have remained cold. I think our Farbrengen today could be in that manner, for us to try to, as best as we can, to internalize some of the stories I'm about to share with you, and unless we, so to speak, imbibe it, take it in, put it into our minds in a deeper sense, it could remain, somewhat stale on the outside, external. And all of us know that when a person lives a more deeper life, a more meaningful life, a more internal life, a more innermost life, life is more, we're all at peace. So the first thing I'd like to emphasize, that the Rebbe was of the opinion that the first thing to be true to ourselves is to recognize that we live with biases. Every one of us has a bias. It's a bias that is some kind. It could be part of our nurture. It could be a mixture of nurture. It could be our free will, how our nature, even how we grew up, and we have to recognize that most of the opinions that we have and how we think has certain frames that of how we look at ourselves and the world around us by these previous, you could say, existing biases that we all have. There was an audience with a very famous bureau chief of a very important national Jewish newspaper, and he said to the Rebbe, our publication is independent and completely objective. And so the Rebbe said, listen, maybe your periodical is independent, but objective? There's no such thing. It is humanly impossible to be completely objective. That's a very important point to keep in mind. And that's the matrix of understanding. If we keep that in mind, that is really most of our operating system. You know, there's a default mechanism that we all have, and how we react, how we reinforce, how we interpret. It's all based on how all these pre-existing biases. And the Rebbe was of great focus to help us appreciate that he himself said that even though he went through a very tough life, you have to appreciate the Rebbe was born in 1902. Can you imagine, from the First World War, the refugee problem, and the typhus epidemic of that time, the persecutions, everything, the communism, the Bolsheviks, the Second World War, the loss of his own members of his family, and living a life without children. The Rebbe was childless. The Rebbe and had the ability to see, and had every reason to be negative. And we once said to one of his close confidants, the Rebbe said, I worked on myself to always look at things in a positive light. Otherwise, I could not have survived. And that really, the Rebbe would say that how we look at life is a matter of choice, not circumstance. And we should derive our perspective from from a deeper sense. It's not the events of our lives that shape us, but the meanings we assign to those events. In other words, if we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. So with that in mind, it's very important to appreciate that in order to be able to live our potential, one has to be able to, in a certain sense, overcome some pre-existing frames. So the Rebbe was of the opinion a person can have the ability to reframe a problem. I want to give you a couple of stories that would help us appreciate that. There was a young student way back, a lady, she's 14 years of age, and she'd gone to typical schools in those days. It was in the 60s, and a new high school, Chabad high school, opened up, and her father said, no, it's time for you to go to this Chabad school. She didn't want to go. She was comfortable where she was, and the father couldn't get her to change her mind. So he says that, why didn't you write to the Rebbe? So this 14-year-old young lady writes to the Rebbe and says, my father wants me to go to the school. It's the first class. I don't want to be a guinea pig. I don't want to be the test case. So what did the Rebbe answer? He sent back a little note saying, crossed out the word guinea pig and put the word chalutzin. You can be a pioneer. As soon as she heard those words, she said, I'm a pioneer. I can now climb mountains. I'm a chalutza. I can do anything. Reframing what looked to be as something limiting to be able to change that. And again, there's another aspect as well, where a young boy in yeshiva, he's not accomplishing as much as the other students in terms of his Talmudical acumen and understanding. And he felt bad. He grew up in an atmosphere where you got to be a Talmudical scholar. That's it. He goes to his teacher, and the teacher says to him, and he says to his teacher, help me, I feel bad, depressed over my situation. And the teacher says, look, listen, not everybody is made out to be a Talmudical scholar, so you'll be a businessman and you'll support the Torah scholars. You become, you get some profession and you'll be able to financially support those who can study. He's really depressed over that answer, and he told his friend that. And his friend said, why didn't you write to the Lubavitcher Rebbe? And the Rebbe answered him the following. He said, there's a famous Mishnah that says, every human being was created to serve the Creator. Every single one of us. So have that in mind. Every single one of us. There's not a question of who's inferior, who's superior. There is no superiority of someone who's a Torah scholar. If he's able to do it as that's his way he's creating. If you're a professional or some other work that you're doing, that's your way. Because everything, the end goal is that all of us are the same, no matter the path. After hearing that approach, he was totally uplifted. So it wasn't a question of him being second class to those who can study, and them kind of being first class over him. That's no such thing. There's no first class and second class. Every human being has the ability to serve the Almighty God, and each one of us does through the profession or activity or whatever our life brings us. That is by divine providence the way we are to approach life. So again, this was the Rebbe's way of reframing something that looked so bad from a guinea pig to becoming a chalutza, to becoming a pioneer, and to appreciate whatever you may be doing in life. That is your goal, and you are as equal as anybody else, because every one of us are here for one reason only, is to serve the Almighty God. So having that in mind, and I'd like to go on very briefly to show how you can even reframe. The Rebbe was very focused on even, you could say, reframing the past. There was somebody who lent his friend a lot of money, and the friend didn't pay it back. So he felt very bad. He felt betrayed. How could it be? He's doing a good deed, helping someone else, and now he's lost all this money. How could God allow this to happen? He approached the Rebbe with this question. The Rebbe says, sometimes it's ordained from heaven that a person should lose his money by paying doctor's bills, parking tickets, or other kinds of misfortunes. Yet when a decree is in place, but it hasn't been enforced yet, we get a chance to lose the same amount of money in a more kinder way, by performing a good deed, such as helping out a friend in need. So with the Rebbe's help in reframing, this same person was able to see the misfortune in a different light. And that is really something we should bear in mind. Time doesn't allow us to go into great detail, but this is what the Rebbe is all about, being able to see everything. And I will conclude with this. They asked him if you had a choice of which era you would like to live in. The Rebbe didn't hesitate for 1 second. Now. He didn't talk about the Talmudical times, the biblical times. Now. Why? Because our world today is at the edge of the imminent arrival of Mashiach, where all of us, through our own good deeds and goodness and kindness, can make a difference to bring the ultimate redemption for the entire world. No more wars, no more fightings, no more famines, but a world where we recognize the holiness in each and every one of us and an awareness of God like never before. This is your host, Rabbi Pearl, wishing you all the best. Sei gesund, and a good week to everybody.
This show is brought to you by the NYCB Theater at Westbury, who presents the comedy of Billy Gardell, who played Mike